All right, today I'm going to talk about Chuck Palahniuk's 1996 novel Fight Club and the 1999 movie that was adapted from this, starring Edward Norton as the narrator, Brad Pitt as Tyler Durden, Helena Bonham Carter as Marla Singer, and Meatloaf as Bob. But before I get into discussing Fight Club, because I don't really want to get into talking about the book from analyzing the characters or analyzing the plot so much, or even the film. I wanted to talk about kind of the philosophy. I'm doing like a Nietzschean reading based on the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, looking at this movie and the novel and kind of analyzing them through Nietzsche's philosophy. So I'm going to read a bit from Thus Spoke Zarathustra from the prologue. Now, this was a allegorical work in which Nietzsche is putting forth his philosophy through the voice of this Persian prophet. He uses Zarathustra as a vehicle to deliver his philosophical take through allegory, right? So you got Zarathustra descends from his solitude in the mountains to tell the world that God is dead. And he's going to preach to mankind the philosophy of the Superman, the Ubermensch, or the Overman. So in this prologue here, Zarathustra retires to the mountains. He comes down the mountains. He meets a hermit on the way down, and he announces to this. He says, "I'm going to go preach to mankind my message of the Overman, the Ubermensch." This saint says to him, let's see. "Do not go to men, but stay in the forest. Go rather to the animals. Why will you not be as I am? A bear amongst bears, a bird amongst birds." "And what does the saint do in the forest?" asked Zarathustra. Again, Zarathustra embodying Nietzsche. He's using this Persian prophet for his mouthpiece. The saint answered, "I make songs and sing them, and when I make songs, I laugh, weep, and mutter. Thus I praise God. With singing, weeping, laughing, and muttering, I praise the God who is my God. But what do you bring us as a gift?" When Zarathustra heard these words, he saluted the saint and said, "What should I have to give you? But let me go quickly, that I may take nothing from you." And thus they parted from one another, the old man and Zarathustra, laughing as two boys laughed. But when Zarathustra was alone, he spoke thus to his heart, "Could it be possible the old saint has not yet heard in his forest that God is dead?" So Zarathustra doesn't have a message for the saint because the saint is a believer in God, the God of Christianity. And so he really has nothing to offer this man. He's going to take his message down to the people and preach to them the Superman. Well, the saint has warned him that the people can't accept your message, right? They're not going to listen to you. So Zarathustra goes down. He goes to the city, and he starts speaking to the people. "I teach you the Superman. Man is something that should be overcome. What have you done to overcome him?" So it's all this self-overcoming. Now, this is going to be a big part of Fight Club, right? This is kind of the Tyler Durden character is, in a way, he's almost like Zarathustra. He's this character of self-overcoming, the transvaluation of all values, will to power, and he becomes like the mentor figure for the narrator. He's very Nietzschean. Well, he preaches his message of the Superman to the people, and they're not really listening. They think that Zarathustra is this tightrope walker, that they're all getting ready to watch this tightrope walker walk across the tightrope, and they think that the Zarathustra is this guy. Zarathustra then tells the people, "Man is a rope fastened between animal and Superman, a rope over an abyss, a dangerous going across, a dangerous wayfaring, a dangerous looking aback, a dangerous shuddering and staying still." What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. What can be loved in man is that he is a going across and a downgoing. I love those who do not know how to live except their lives be a downgoing, for they are those who are going across. I love the great despisers, for they are the great venerators and arrows of longing for the other bank. I love those who do not first seek beyond the stars for reasons to go down and to be sacrifices, but who sacrifice themselves to the earth, that the earth may one day belong to the Superman, the Overman, the Ubermensch. I love him who lives for knowledge and who wants knowledge that one day Superman may live, and thus he wills his own downfall. I love him who works and invents that he may build a house for the Superman and prepare earth, animals, and plants for him, for thus he wills his own downfall. I love him who loves his virtue, for virtue is will to downfall and an arrow of longing. I love him who keeps back no drop of spirit for himself, but wants to be the spirit of his virtue entirely, thus he steps as spirit over the bridge. I love him who makes a predilection and a fate of his virtue, thus for his virtue's sake will he live or not live. I love him who does not want too many virtues. One virtue is more virtue than two, because it's more of a knot for fate to cling to. I love him whose soul is lavish, who neither wants nor returns thanks, for he always gives and will not preserve himself. I love him who is ashamed when the dice fall in his favor, and who then asks, am I then a cheat? For he wants to perish. I love him who throws golden words in advance of his deed and always performs more than he promised, for he wills his own downfall. So, I mean, I could go through all this, right? But we'll go on. I love him who chastises his God because he loves his God, for he must perish by the anger of his God. I love him whose soul is deep, even in its ability to be wounded, and whom even a little thing can destroy. Thus he is glad to go over a bridge. He's preaching all this stuff about man who sacrifices himself for the advancement of the human race. So it's not about you, it's about the advancement of the human species. To go beyond the bounds. Because for Nietzsche, I think he finds in the beginning of The Joyous Science here, there's a passage about the goal of humanity, about the goal of man is to advance the species as a whole. So he says here, this is The Joyous Science, Book 1, Part 1. Whether I look upon men with a good or evil eye, I always find them engaged in but one task, each and every one of them, the preservation of the human race. And certainly not from any great love for it, but simply because nothing in them is older, stronger, more inexorable, or invincible than that instinct, because this instinct is precisely the nature of our species and herd. With our usual short-sightedness, we are quick to divide our neighbors rather neatly into beneficial and injurious, into good and evil men. However, upon a great reckoning, when we further consider the whole, we become suspicious of this neat division, and in the end, abandon it. Even the most injurious man may still be the most beneficial of all, with respect to the preservation of the human race, for he preserves in himself, or by his effect on others, impulses without which mankind might long since have languished or decayed. So he's talking about these kind of like outcasts of society, that they preserve within themselves something primal, that this vitality and driving force. So you think about like the settlers that went out and settled the Old West, right? The pioneer spirit. A lot of the people that went out there were outlaws, people that, I mean, committed acts of genocide and stuff. There's a lot of questionable things about them. It was almost like a primitive, primal, you know, I don't know what I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. They weren't tame or docile, is what I'm getting at. Okay, the people that went out and went on the built civilization, right? They had like this vitality to them, which modern man, people like Edward Norton's character in Fight Club, okay, he doesn't have. He's sitting around. He is accumulating things unto himself, living in this capitalist system. Okay, And this is the warning Zarathustra delivers his message to the people in the marketplace, telling them that man is supposed to overcome, at least in Nietzsche's understanding, and they don't want to listen to him. He comes and he preaches the Übermensch. Behold, I am a prophet of the lightning and a heavy drop from the cloud, but this lightning is called Superman. So he's delivered his message, tells them that man's something to be overcome, that the goal is to to overcome this nihilism, this coming nihilism, because God is dead, to push on and to be this bigger thing. When Zarathustra had spoken these words, he looked again at the people and fell silent. There they stand, he said to his heart. There they laugh. They do not understand me. I am not the mouth for these ears. So he can tell that the people aren't listening to him. So he tries to deliver them a warning and tell them about the last man, the ultimate man. This is actually supposed to be something that is a warning to them that if you don't listen to my words, this is what you're going to become. And this, to me, is what Edward Norton's character is in Fight Club, or the narrator in Fight Club. He is the last man, okay? At least when Tyler Durden finds him, or when Tyler Durden meets Edward Norton's character, the Edward Norton character is the last man that Zarathustra is warning about. So here's the last man. I shall speak to them of the most contemptible man, and that is the ultimate man, or the last man. And thus spoke Zarathustra to the people. It is time for man to fix his goal. It is time for man to plant the seed of his highest hope. His soil is still rich enough for it, but the soil will one day be poor and weak. No longer will a high tree be able to grow from it. Alas, the time is coming when man will no more shoot the arrow of his longing out over mankind, and the string of his bow will have forgotten how to twang. I tell you, one must have chaos in one to give birth to a dancing star. I tell you, you still have chaos in you. Alas, the time is coming when man will give birth to no more stars. Alas, the time of the most contemptible man is coming, the man who can no longer despise himself. Behold, I shall show you the ultimate man. What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? Thus asked the ultimate man and blanks. So the last man, the comfortable man, will ask these profound questions. What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is star? And then he blinks. It's almost like he's in a stupor, or he's one woken from sleep, but he goes back to sleep. He asks these big questions and then never really ponders them deeply and gives an answer for any of them. He's not really concerned with them, right? The earth has become small, and upon it hops the ultimate man, who makes everything his small. His race is inexterminable as the flea. The ultimate man lives longest. We have discovered happiness, says the ultimate man, and blink. That's the whole goal of life, is to be happy, to be comfortable, to live a life of ease and comfort and happiness. They have left the places where living was hard, for one needs warmth. One still loves one's neighbor and rubs oneself against him, for one needs warmth. Sickness and mistrust count as sins with them. One should go about warily. He is a fool who still stumbles over stones or over men. A little poison now and then, that produces pleasant dreams, and a lot of poison at last for a pleasant death. So they take drugs or pharmaceuticals, whether prescribed or unprescribed, whether this be alcohol, whatever, to anesthetize themselves so that they don't feel the pain of life, right? They just want to live comfort. They don't want to be alone with pain. It's about trying to escape from pain and not deal with pain. The Übermensch, or the overman, however, he takes both the good and the bad of life, right? Both the pleasure and the pain, and he faces both of them. And this is what the self-overcoming is to overcome the struggles to transcend and become something more. A person that never encounters pain becomes stagnant. At least that's Nietzsche's ideas here. Let's see. Nobody grows rich or poor anymore. Both are too much of a burden. Who wants to rule? Who obey? Both are too much of a burden. No herdsman and one herd. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone is the same. Whoever thinks otherwise goes voluntarily into the madhouse. So he's talking about kind of like egalitarianism. Everybody's equal in this system. There's just everybody's the same. It's just milquetoast society, right? Formerly, all the world was mad, say the most acute of them, and blink. So they look at past generations and they think everybody in the past was crazy and they didn't know anything. Like, we are more enlightened individuals now. We know more than our ancestors, right? The past, they were all crazy, and they just kind of dismiss history because we are, we know more, we are better, we are more elevated than these people from future generations. They are clever and know everything that has ever happened, so there is no end to their mockery. They still quarrel, they soon make up, otherwise indigestion would result. They have their little pleasure for the day and their little pleasure for the night, but they respect health. We have discovered happiness, says the ultimate man, and blink. And here ended Zarathustra's first discourse, which is also called the prologue, for at this point the shouting and mirth of the crowd interrupted him. Give us the ultimate man, O Zarathustra, so they cried. Make us into this ultimate man. You can have the Superman. And all the people laughed and shouted. But Zarathustra grew sad and said to his heart, They do not understand me. I am not the mouth for these ears. Perhaps I lived too long in the mountains, listened too much to the trees and streams. Now I speak to them as to goat herds. Unmoved is my soul, and bright as the mountain in the morning. But they think me cold and a mocker with fearful jokes. And now they look at me and laugh, and laughing they still hate me. There is ice in their laughter. So he delivers this warning to people about the last man, this man that lives in pleasure and comfort. And instead of taking it to heart as a warning, they actually say, this is what we want. Give us this. We don't want the Ubermensch. We don't want the Overman. We don't want the Superman. We want the last man. We want to be this person of comfort and ease, this person that's devoid of pain, this person that's just milquetoast, just eking out an existence of mediocrity. That's what they crave for, okay? And I think that's kind of what's going on with the narrator in this book, reading from his IKEA catalog, ordering his stuff so that he can live in a life of ease and comfort. If he gets that last piece of furniture, that his collection of mediocrity will be complete. And this is where Tyler Durden enters into the scene and shakes the narrator's whole world and turns it upside down. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight as a difference between the book and the film is that in the film, when the narrator meets Tyler Durden, he meets him on an airplane while he's traveling. Very different introduction in the novel. In the novel, the narrator first meets Tyler Durden on a nude beach. Tyler's completely naked, right? And he's in the sand, and he is dragging these logs to build a sculpture, essentially. What happens when he places these 5 logs is that it casts a shadow that forms a giant hand, okay, in the sand that you can see. And you can sit inside of it at the hour of 4:30 for approximately a minute. And for 1 minute, like, the shadow is perfect. It's a perfect human hand. Now, a lot of people have said that, well, this is homoerotic imagery, and that's not what I saw when I read it. I saw it as kind of an inverse of the book of Genesis. When God creates the first man in the biblical account, the book of Genesis, God takes from the dust of the earth and he forms Adam, okay, the first man. Adam forms him from the dust of the earth and then breathes life into him. Well, this is almost an inverse because remember, the biblical account says that Adam was naked and he was not ashamed. So in the Garden of Eden, prior to Adam eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, he was not aware of his nakedness. All right. So here we have Tyler Durden walking on a beach naked. And what is he doing? He's forming a giant hand and he then sits inside of the palm of, or the shadow of this hand, right? It's representative of God. Instead of God creating Adam or Adam, as in the biblical account, Tyler Durden has created God. And really what it is it's the shadow of God, which is something that Nietzsche writes about, the shadow of God, which Tyler Durden then walks and leaves behind. So from the Joyous Science, this is book number 3, aphorism 108. After the Buddha died, people showed his shadow for centuries afterwards in a cave, a monstrous and unearthly shadow. God is dead. But given the ways of men, perhaps for millennia to come, there will be caves in which his shadow will be shown, and we still have to subdue his shadow. So Nietzsche's big critique, he says that the belief in morals and morality, right, it's based in metaphysics. And since Nietzsche really kind of becomes like a materialist, what then do you base ethics upon? If ethics are based upon God, if morals and laws are based upon God, then the fight is against the shadow of God, right? Like all these basic systems that you have, Marxism, communism, utilitarianism, um, basic like human ethics, right? And these systems, they're all based upon kind of like maximizing happiness for the greatest number of people. And he said this is basically critique is that these are all based upon like Christian ethics and values, right? If I was to walk up to an atheist today and say, why is it wrong to murder, right? They would give me some sort of ethical discourse on why murder is wrong, but what is it based in? And really, Nietzsche is saying at its heart, it's the shadow of God. It's based in something that's dead. So, like, you can't make ethics claims based upon metaphysics. That's what he's getting at. All these systems are based upon metaphysics. So all these various moral systems that we have are really, they have their basis in something that's no longer exists. Now, I'm not a Nietzschean, I'm a Christian, so I don't believe this. I'm just saying this is what Nietzsche's teaching. So yeah, I really saw the hand chapter and him being naked as kind of an inverse of God creating Adam. So Adam is creating God, right? And that's not in the film. I guess I'll get into one more thing. We'll talk about living dangerously. There is a scene that occurs both in the book and in the film in which they walk up to this clerk, pull a gun on him. This is after the start of Project Mayhem, right? And they ask this guy, "What do you want to be?" Right? He says he wants to be a veterinarian, a vet. He's not doing it because it's too much work. So in a way, he's become like the last man. So this Ubermensch character comes along and confronts, what's this guy's name? Raymond Hessel, right? Pressed the gun hard against his temple, and he asked him the question, "What do you want to be?" If you had 1 second, you might die in 1 second or in 1 hour. You decide. So lie to me. Tell me the first thing off the top of your head. Make something up. Let's see. What does he say? What does Raymond Hessel want to be when he grows up? And he says he wants to be a vet. All right. So he says essentially, I know who you are. I know where you live. I'm keeping your license. I'm going to check on you, Mr. Raymond K. Hessel, in 3 months and in 6 months and then in a year. And if you aren't back in school on your way to being a veterinarian, you will be dead. So he's forcing this guy to snap out of his malaise, out of just living a life of comfort and ease, and forcing him to live dangerously, right? To overcome. Now, the motives behind this, the moral implications of it, again, it kind of goes back to Nietzsche. Like, the whole idea of the we saw in Joyous Science that maybe it's not the moral men, so to speak, that are the driving force or the transformer of society, but that evil men are just as capable of transforming society as well. He says again, I'll reread it. With our usual short-sightedness, we are quick to divide our neighbors rather neatly into beneficial and injurious, into good and evil men. However, upon a great reckoning, when we further consider the whole, become suspicious of this neat division, and in the end abandon it. Even the most injurious man may still be the most beneficial of all. Right? With respect to the preservation of the human race, for he preserves in himself or by his effect on others impulses without which mankind might long since have languished or decayed. So this Hessel guy was going to live a life of mediocrity as a convenience store clerk, but this evil man, right, comes along, Tyler Durden, the narrator, whatever. In the book, it's the narrator who does this, under the influence of Tyler Durden. In the movie, it's Tyler Durden who pulls the gun. So there's a minor change there, but in either case, it's the effect of Tyler Durden here as this force of change to shake men out of their malaise. So he's very much like the Zarathustra type character, all right? It then devolves into Project Mayhem in the novel. We go beyond Fight Club. You get the invention of this thing called Project Mayhem, which is almost like a paramilitary organization. And I will read one final thing about capitalism from Nietzsche versus a militaristic culture. So we'll read from the Gay Science, Aphorism 42 on work and tedium. This is a critique on capitalism. This is something that Fight Club is really coming against, right? Seeking work for the sake of wages in the civilized world today, almost everybody does that. Work has become a means, not an end, which is why people are not very discerning in their choice of employment as long as they are amply rewarded. Now there are those rare few who would rather die than work without taking pleasure in it. People who are particular and hard to please, who are not served by ample reward if the work itself is not rewarding. This rare breed includes all manner of artists and contemplatives, but also men of leisure who spend their lives hunting and traveling, or in love affairs and adventures. All of them will endure toil and hardship if it is associated with pleasure, and the heaviest, hardest toil if need be, but otherwise they are resolutely idle, even if this idleness goes hand in hand with poverty, disgrace, and danger to life and limb. It is not tedium they fear so much as work without pleasure. They even need a fair amount of tedium if their work is to succeed. For the thinker and for any inventive genius, tedium is that disconcerting state of soul becalmed which precedes the happy voyage in fair winds. He must bear it and await its effect on him. It is precisely this which lesser natures cannot quite manage. To dispel tedium by any means necessary is uncouth, just as working without pleasure is uncouth. Can go on to that. He talks about Europeans poisoning themselves with alcohol. Again, going back to this anesthetization of the person, right? So he has snapped this Hessel character out of the state of tedium and forced him to go out and overcome. So we'll get into Project Mayhem now. This is from aphorism number 40, Gay Science. The absence of noble demeanor. Soldiers and their leaders always comport themselves towards one another in loftier manner than workers and their employers. At least for the time being, culture with a military basis still stands high above all so-called industrial culture, which, as presently constituted, is unquestionably the most debased form of life that ever was. Here, everything is determined by sheer need. Workers want to live and have to sell themselves, but despise him who exploits this need and buys them. So it's kind of like a master and slave type relationship, right? The worker sells himself to the employer for his wages. He says, it is curious that submission to powerful, all inspiring, and even terrible individuals, to tyrants and generals, is felt far less acutely than submission to such generic bores as our captains of industry. In the employer, workers usually see nothing but a sly dog who feeds on the misery of others, whose name, stature, character, and reputation are a matter of perfect indifference to him. So what he's saying is that people would much rather choose and have admiration for a great military leader such as Napoleon, George Washington, I don't know, Ulysses S. Grant, some just tyrant like Genghis Khan or something, rather than their own employer. Like your boss is a tedious bore. Uh, in a lot of cases, he's just, like, let's just put it this way. Do you have more respect and admiration for Genghis Khan or for Jeff Bezos? I mean, do you look at Bill Gates and are you inspired by him? Or do you look at Napoleon and think, you know, whether or not you love or hate Napoleon, compare him to Bill Gates or one of these other leaders of industry, right? I think you'll find that you have a lot more respect and admiration for the military figure than you do for some CEO of a major company. That's what he's getting at. Um, it is probable that in all these forms and insignia of a superior race, which alone makes a person interesting, right? Industrialists and commercial magnates have thus far been woefully deficient. Had they the distinction of a noble birth and their look and bearing, there might not be any interest in socialism among the masses. So he's saying everybody that wants to become a socialist or become like a Marxist or whatever, look at Karl Marx. He's kind of a slovenly looking character. And a lot of people, from what I've heard, Marx, I guess he stunk. What Nietzsche is saying is that, like, if these people that worked in the realm of capitalism, these captains of industry and whatnot, if they had like a nobility about them, right? If they were like a Jack Diesel, ripped dude that was like suave and good looking and kind of commanded like a presence when they stepped into the room. They just drew like awe and admiration, right? Like, wow, what a man. Then perhaps all of society would not be, leveling out and trending towards Marxist values. So I think that's kind of like what Project Mayhem in the novel is. They all follow Tyler Durden. It becomes like a military organization, which it's ordered, and they're looking with awe and admiration at Tyler Durden, not the way that the narrator looks at his boss in the book. His boss is kind of this pathetic guy that's being described by Nietzsche there. Now, I've gone on long enough, 33 minutes. I could talk a lot more about this, but I just want to say I think that reading Fight Club, the book, or watching the film, if you're reading into it Marxism, I think you're reading it wrong. I think that the film requires a reading from a Nietzschean worldview, even though I don't align with Nietzsche. Okay, there are things about Nietzsche that I can get on board with, that I like. There are things about Nietzsche that I absolutely disagree with. However, this isn't not me. I'm not giving you like what I think here per se. I'm kind of just trying to tell you the way that I read this and the way that I see it. Now, the finality of the book and the finality of the film, they differ, okay? You get the major plot twist, which I'm not going to give away, but in the book, Project Mayhem, they're going to blow up a building, and in the movie, they're going to blow up buildings. The reasons for blowing the buildings up differ, and the final fate of the narrator in the novel is different than in the film. So If you don't want that spoiled here, I'm going to give it away. I'm not going to give away the major plot twist, but I'm going to tell you the major difference. You've been warned. 3, 2, 1. All right. In the book, Project Mayhem fails. The explosives don't go off. The building doesn't blow up. And the narrator ends up in an insane asylum. Okay? In an insane asylum. Right? In the movie, he succeeds. The buildings explode. The reasoning is different. In the movie, he's trying to reset credit to 0 and take like humanity back to, I don't know, like a great reset. Okay. The movie ends with Marla and the narrator holding hands, kind of like as the new Adam and Eve of a new creation. Like society's being reset back to 0. So there you kind of had that biblical comparison there, right? The book, you can almost say that the narrator is a I don't know what you want to say, that he's failed. He's a failed Ubermensch, I guess. I don't know if he's a failed Ubermensch in the movie either. I have no idea. That's for you to debate and decide for yourself. But I did want to touch on that a bit, because whether or not his self-overcoming, like his overcoming himself, his will to power and all that, and actuating, transvaluating all values and becoming like the overman, whether he succeeds or not, I open that to debate. But I just wanted to leave my thoughts on this, reading through it. I know this was a lot. It was long. Maybe many of you bowed out long ago and thought this was boring, but that's just what I wanted to say. A Nietzschean reading, a Fight Club. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.